Well, how then we define the middle class generally and for the Russian landscape? Income. Income is something that is used in many papers, in research being done on this issue. And in the early period, it didn't work for Russia at all. I already said this. But now they say that if we take in also the purchasing parity per person and some other things, like doing some math on the figures, we can say that Russian middle class has this or that income, and probably it's like around $12,000 because they calculate it in dollars per family per year. But this is, you can read about the details of how you calculate it in the paper that I give you in the home assignment for this week. And there are many materials in the web also on this issue. But in this course, I am interested not exactly in the figures, but other aspects that usually are usually correlate with the concept of middle class, though it is, as I already said, understood differently even in the Great Britain and the United States. Those features that define a middle class are determined on differently. But still, let's name them. Besides income, it will be education. Having higher education, or as they call it, tertiary education, is a characteristic of middle class. It's also characteristic of the way children are raised in the family, with the idea coming from the parents, actually the presumption coming from parents that higher education is important, necessary, their children will get higher education, and it will be their way to having success in life and achieving their goals, life goals. Profession. Certain professions are definitely associated with middle class. It's not just, the old and respected professions of a lawyer, a business person, or medical doctor, but also new professions that correspond to this idea. Engineers, people in mass media, and many new professions about which I will speak a bit later. The same idea is, of course, valid for the Russian middle class. Here, profession and education will be even more characteristic than income. Though just recently, only a few years ago, exactly people who worked in education, teachers, university professors, were among the lower paid part of population. Usually their salaries were lower than average for the region, but the program that was a federal program that was targeted exactly at raising the salaries now led to the fact that now the regional average salary is something that university professors and teachers in Russia already got, so they are not below this line. And in a way, then now we can count everything that is related to education as going along the lines of how we determine middle class, concurring with the income in a way. The three other less material things that I actually highlighted with red on the slide is values, lifestyle, and cultural identification. This is what is more interesting for our course, where we are talking about values, cultural identification, and how it is reflected in the discourse in communication. These things partly belonging to the traditional co-culture in Russia, partly to the westernized co-culture, being divided between them, but both really separate middle class as a certain group. When we are talking about younger population, people with new professions, and their lifestyle and cultural identification would be more characterized by the westernized co-culture. When we are talking about people in the regions, people in the traditional professions belonging to middle class, like engineers or teachers, we can see probably more features of the traditional co-culture of Russia. But we need to understand the relativity and cultural sensitivity of these labels. I was talking about specifically Russia, and we will talk about some cultural syndromes associated with what is considered to be now middle class, but had other labels before. And I would like to read this quote that you see on the slide from the paper by Lilia Ovcharova, which says, which gives us certain characteristics of the current understanding of middle class in Russia. The Russian middle class as a social group is younger, better educated, and wealthier than the average Russian population, and its members live predominantly in big cities. It is more actively involved in innovative economic sectors and is more entrepreneurial and more sophisticated in its financial behavior. The share of the middle class in consumption by far exceeds that of other strata of Russian society. So actually this description covers all those features or parameters that we mentioned: education, profession, lifestyle, and partly cultural identification. So what we can say about cultural identification of the core of middle class? It is actually covered by certain characteristics that partly I mentioned already. Middle class is a culture of young and wealthy, and it can be seen. And we're not talking about specifically, very affluent, very wealthy people, but what is considered to be this younger, dynamic part of Russian society called middle class. We see it in everything, starting from flashy cars to flashy lifestyle. This lifestyle where it is so important what to wear, where to eat, how to educate kids, and in what country, better not in Russia. It creates the visibility of certain social groups. These actually rather wealthy people are responsible for many stereotypes that exist about Russians. If these stereotypes started with really oligarchs and tycoons and their huge spendings and their villas, their behaviors in the holidays and so on and so forth. Now we see more, at least here within the country, and this image may as well also travel across the borders. We see more the image of not an oligarch, but a representative of a new profession in mass media or show business or public relations, people who earn a lot of money, much more than the rest of Russia. We are talking about people in Moscow or St. Petersburg who are very sensitive towards everything that is trendy and new. We could probably call them yuppies if the word were not so much associated with the New York City young bankers. Here it's probably not only bankers, but the style, the lifestyle would be very visible as compared to how people live in the small cities and regions. Spending their holidays abroad, and not just anywhere abroad, but in rather trendy and interesting and exotic places, having their kids getting education in Great Britain or Malta, for instance, or the United States, wearing, brand clothes, driving, only specific types of cars. This affluence allows them to feel free, and this affluence, this lifestyle allows them to feel difference. They are new in this new economy and new country. In a way, it is the result of the economic boom that Russia had before 2009. Maybe things are, and that's what people talk about, things are different now, and it is already reflected in the lifestyle. But one more important aspect of it actually comes not in the amount of consumption, but how this consumption, the style of consumption, is reflected in what people feel politically in their activism, and I will speak about it in a second. The two things just to mention is that Moscow is not Russia, is a very typical and actually rather used expression when in discussion people want to say that, you know, the level of life that majority of population, not majority, but a significant portion of Moscow population can enjoy is not the lifestyle that people will enjoy in the regions. And when you want to say that you don't know what actually is going in your big country, and that the country is so diverse and has so different values and aspirations, this phrase will be very, very much used. Moscow is not Russia. It's more about income and jobs, of course, but another expression, which is probably not as widely used, but still you can find it in discussions, Facebook population is not Russian people. It's more about this values that translate themselves into political activism. Why I said that consumption, this consumerism and the lifestyle actually translated into different in the attitudes towards the political system, towards the government, because consumers, these modern consumers, want to be treated by the state as clients. They don't want anymore to be treated as subjects. So this something that started as pure economic and socioeconomic situation when people got more, say, economic freedom, so to say, translated, worked into this different feeling. I see how I'm treated at the restaurant, at the car dealer, at the clinic where I go. I want my state to treat me the same way, and the state is rather slow at doing this, to say the least. So probably this is the ideological, the cultural explanation of that political dissent that came from the new middle class, as they call it, or they call it creative class, because the labels middle class still and the creative class or angry city dwellers, if we translate it from Russian, they don't coincide. I would still prefer to call middle class that those people who are more interested in stability, in keeping and having their well-paid jobs, ability to give education, if needed, private education to their children, to have better health care. These are the values, traditional values of the middle class. The values that underlie the political dissent, political activism of the younger, more affluent, Moscow and Petersburg-based creative class, as we say, angry citizens, they are slightly different. They grow from that, but they reflect, in a way, this younger, more passionate character of an emerging Russian middle class, middle in this aspect. So this is a new trend for those people who are part of this middle class and who actually come from intelligentsia, and we will talk about in a second.